Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here for our technical advisory group meeting for Washington State Ferry's Fauntleroy Ferry Terminal Replacement Project. I'm Laura Levisoner-Miller, and I will be helping to facilitate today's meeting, and we'll go ahead and get started. Before we get started, I just want to remind everyone that we do have community members who may be attending today. They will be in listen-only mode. David, I see your hands up. Did you want to jump in?
No, sorry, accident.
Oh, no problem. And we also encourage anyone participating to email comments to our project team at any time. We check that email frequently. And as a reminder, we do record these meetings and post them on our website for anyone who's not able to participate live. So you got an overview of the agenda there on the screen. We will continue our conversation on key elements that will inform the level 3 screening with a focus on traffic analysis. So you'll be hearing a lot from Mark Bandy today about our traffic study. But first, Dave is going to share an update on the status of the Good to Go and advanced ticketing study, which is the topic of our next meeting. We also have a few minutes to recap what we've heard on the environmental analysis with Marcia and hear any final questions or comments on this information. And then we'll spend most of our time digging into the results of the traffic analysis. And we have some time at the end for questions, conversation. This was a more casual conversation, so please don't hesitate to raise your hand if you have any questions throughout the meeting. And now Hadley is just going to remind us where we're at with the project timeline.
Good afternoon, everyone. So this schedule we've seen before, it's showing the timeline for this planning and environmental linkages study that we're midway through. Well, actually, hopefully more than midway through. We're in this level 3 screening process where we're looking at the set of refined alternatives developed earlier this year, looking at some of the analysis that's been done to inform the screening criteria, and then we'll be doing the screening early fall, and with the hopes of selecting a single alternative to move forward into environmental review at the end of this year, wrapping up the Pell study report in early 2020, and then beginning environmental review, and then moving into design and construction. We're still on track for that construction period to begin in the 27-29 biennium. So that's just a little overview of where we're at right now. Next slide. And this slide is just another depiction of the process where we started out with a range of alternatives during level 1, kind of every out-of-the-box alternative we could think of, narrowed it down to the existing dock location, terminal location, and then now have the set of refined level 3 screening alternatives, all of which are different configurations and sizes of a dock at the existing location, holding vehicles on the dock and along Fauntleroy Way in different capacities and configurations. And the goal is to identify an alternative to advance into further study and review from this set of alternatives. So this roadmap is what we've been using with our community advisory group as a depiction of all of the topics we've discussed with them. Most of the same we've discussed with this group as well. Today, the two with the light green boxes around them are the 2 topics we're going to focus on today, revisiting the environmental analysis that we discussed at the last meeting and sort of following up on any lingering comments or questions there. And then we sent you the traffic memo, traffic analysis memo ahead of time. And Mark, as Laura mentioned, is going to go into a lot more detail on that and take your questions. And then the topics that are remaining for more in-depth discussion are the Good to Go advanced ticketing study, cost and construction approach, which we will likely cover in a single meeting. And then we'll move into talking about the level 3 screening results, where we'll do an initial screening and then come back to the group for comments before focusing in on a single alternative to capture in the Pell study report. So that's what the rest of this year will look like. Those final 2 boxes will likely bleed into early 2025, but we're hoping to wrap up the study by the early part of next year. Are there any questions on process or schedule No. Okay. Well, then I think I'm turning it over to you, Dave.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Hadley. And before I hand it off to Mark Bandy, I did want to kind of talk a little bit more about what Hadley mentioned here about Good to Go, and kind of share an update on a little bit more on the specifics. So our consultant team has been focused on developing this traffic analysis, which we're sharing with you this afternoon. And that will set the foundation and provide the data that we need to evaluate Good to Go. So we have a few goals around that work, and they include, first, just determining the feasibility, viability of the Good to Go and the Wave to Go advanced ticketing at the terminal, which is something that many of you are aware of, that we already have in place, the Wave to Go process. We're going to evaluate reductions in the processing time and improving customer service as part of that. And then we're going to use it we're also going to, in that study, evaluate potential policy changes, capital costs, and what the schedule would look like to implement. So these are all the goals that will guide us towards understanding if Good to Go is something that we could really, truly use, and it would improve our operational efficiency at the terminal. So as one of our standing directives, we're also looking at ways to improve operational efficiency at all of our terminals. And many of our customers already purchase tickets in advance, which is used through this Wave to Go ticketing process. And we're looking at ways where we can enhance that, as well as explore how Good to Go, which is the technology that we have. You've seen it on Tacoma Narrows, on 405, on the SR 99 tunnel, as a way to make this terminal move a little more efficiently. So we're evaluating multiple options for Good to Go, and looking at all level 3 alternatives and how Good to Go will affect those. The Good to Go study does go just beyond time savings, though. There's a number of policy and issues that we need to address, and how, for example, how Good to Go would change fares and what this would mean to customers who rely on this service. So we're also considering other important factors like the cost and the time it would take to implement. So there's a lot of things that factor into that big decision, and that's why we're going to have a whole meeting to talk about it. We've heard a lot of interest on this topic from the community, and we're eager to jump into this. We remain committed to providing everyone with the time to fully review the study, so you will all be getting a copy of that at least a week or two before that meeting. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Marcia, and she's going to talk a little bit about any remaining questions that you or others had about the environmental analysis that I've done. So take it away, Marcia.
Okay. Thank you, Dave, and good afternoon to everybody. At our last meeting, we shared the environmental analysis, which is the work that we did to evaluate how level 3 alternatives interact with key environmental resources, including potential benefits and impacts to the surrounding environment. With that, we developed this analysis by reviewing public data, conducting limited field work near the terminal, and considering input from communities, agencies, and tribes. Our analysis focuses on the environmental elements in the level 3 screening criteria that are most crucial to meeting the project's purpose and need. So, with thanks to everyone who shared feedback on this information, I want to just recap what we've heard from you and our community advisory group members. First, it's questions about environmental mitigation and impacts of construction, including noise, air, and light pollution. And then interest in overwater coverage during and after construction and impacts to treaty fishing rights. Third, it's questions about the scour hole, eelgrass, and macroalgae, and interest in how dock height and length relate to sea level rise and light penetration. Then there was interest in how the quantity of piles affects debris under the dock, and then emphasis on protecting fish and wildlife near the terminal. So we'll be using this information to apply the screening criteria to the level 3 alternatives and identify an alternative to advance it to environmental review. So these are the collection of topics we heard there. One was not more heavily voiced than another, but it's the collection. So I'll turn it over to Laura to facilitate any Q&A any questions that you might have.
Thanks, Marcia. We'll just pause there to see if there's any lingering questions about the environmental analysis before we move on to discussing traffic. Rod?
Yeah, Rod Malcolm here, staff for the Squamish tribe. I've mentioned this before in writing, but I just want to bring it up again because not everyone may have been in the previous meetings, that the Fauntleroy Creek, the marine area in front of it, is mapped as a pocket estuary, and pocket estuaries provide habitat for non-natal juvenile salmonids, and the environmental review is written in a way that discounts that. It concentrates on the benefits of the estuary zone there to natal Fauntleroy salmonids versus the juvenile salmonids that are migrating along the shoreline. So just wanted to bring that up again. And the next one is how pile spacing interacts with debris. I raised that earlier and I got a comment back that the size of the debris varies in length and stuff like that. That was not the issue. I understand it varies in size. It's that if there's going to be claims that increasing the pile spacing is going to reduce the amount of debris pack trapped under trapped by the piles, there needs to be an analysis to show, well, that truly happened, because it just takes one big piece to start trapping, that's snagged to start trapping a lot of pieces. And so there really should be a size analysis to get an idea of just what is the probability that the increased pile spacing will reduce the amount of debris that's trapped under the pier. Because if it's an example, if it's increased from say 15 feet to 25 feet, but the pieces of wood that tend to do most of the trapping of debris are 30 feet or 35 feet in length, there may not be much benefit. So I'm not discounting the fact that there will be as a benefit, but it should be quantified to the extent possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Rod.
Thank you, Rod, for both those important comments. Any other feedback? And Sophie has also added a copy of the environmental analysis to the meeting chat, so you have a copy handy. Rod, I see your hand is still up. Did you have something else, or is that from before? Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and move us along, but we can always come back to this topic if needed. With that, Mark is going to walk us through the traffic analysis.
Sure, happy to. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. So as has been introduced, we're going to talk about the traffic analysis, which hit the high-level points that were from the memo that you all received a week ago. So let's go to the next slide, Laura. So the first thing we wanted to touch on and remind us all is how this relates to the purpose and need. Within the purpose and need statement for the project, it calls for providing operational efficiencies that support the reliable service levels on the Fauntleroy Bash and Southworth Triangle route, and also meeting service levels that have been projected into the 2040 long-range plan for Washington State ferries. And the traffic analysis that we have been doing to date touches on two aspects that feed the level 3 screening criteria, and that is how an alternative may alter the time to load and unload ferries, as well as how an alternative may affect queuing that goes on along the shoulder holding lanes on Fauntleroy Way South. And then also just reiterate what Dave said in his comments earlier. This really provides a foundation for then how we evaluate good to go or way to go advanced ticketing options, and how those two applications could also change load and unload times as well as queuing. Next slide. So this is showing performance factors that relate to that criteria of the operational efficiency, and the criteria is relating it to minimizing dwell time, processing vehicles more efficiently, which all then relate to maintaining on-time performance. So again, we're going to be looking at how does the alternative maintain or improve ferry schedule reliability, and how does the alternative change the Fauntleroy way to get to the evaluation phase of the alternatives. We go to the next slide, Laura. You'll all be very familiar with this terminology and the comparison. We do need to consider a no-build option. That is an option that only maintains the dock and terminal berthing structures to keep the operating the terminal. It does not address the purpose and need, including not replacing the terminal with a higher dock to address sea level rise. And as you all are familiar with, we need to consider this option as along the other Pell alternatives to have a baseline for evaluation, and also to meet the requirements of the environmental review under NEPA and CEPA. So I want to touch on a bit of the operational efficiency context at the Fauntleroy terminal area today. With respect to on-time performance, Washington State Ferry's definition of being on time is that trips depart within 10 minutes of their scheduled departure time. System-wide, they have an on-time performance goal of 95%. And then you'll see right below that in the next bullet point what the most recent measurement of that has been for the triangle route. In 2020, you'll see it was 94%. 2019, when the revised throughput schedule went into place, it was 93%. And in years prior, it was around 90%. In the graphic on the right, we show graphically where the southbound holding lane is. It's along the shoulder of Fauntleroy Way South, holds approximately 143 vehicles upstream. And then with respect to the operational efficiency, longer queues can affect that ability to operate efficiently, but also it can have effects on safety and community and customer experience. Next slide. So let's talk about the methodology for our traffic analysis. We used a traffic modeling software program called VSIM. You all likely perhaps run into that in past projects. It's a very common software tool used to assess transportation projects. And so specifically here, we used it to help assess the load and unload times, as well as the queue length during the weekday afternoon period, which is when we see the highest volume sailings. Some of the input assumptions is that we're basing this on the 3-vessel schedule that was from the 2018-2020 time period. We're using the Issaquah class ferry capacity, which is what's long-range plan. That's what's out there today and is in the long-range plan for this route. They hold 124 vehicles. What we modeled were 2 consecutive sailings in the afternoon, and those are, the first one is a route that went Fauntleroy to Southworth to Vashon, and then it is followed by a vessel that goes Fauntleroy, Vashon to Southworth. There's an average of 25 minutes between the sailings, and then the dwell time for each of those sailings was 20 and 18 minutes respectively. And then with respect to analyzing the queuing along Fauntleroy Way Southwest, we took an approach to estimate queuing across all sailings on both weekdays and weekends, looking into the future. Again, this is a 3-boat schedule and taking a look into the 2040 long-range plan forecasts, route and volumes on Fauntleroy Way, and show that information is in. We go to the next slide, Laura. So we're going to show you a couple of screenshots from the VSIM model. Again, you have all likely seen some images such as this. This is just a snapshot of how that model runs. You can see we have Fauntleroy Way represented as it goes diagonally across the screen. And you can see in the lower right that we have buses that move along Fauntleroy Way that are within the model. On the upper left portion of Fauntleroy Way, you'll see vehicles that are in the holding lane coming southbound, and you'll see gaps between those vehicles that align and match up with where there are driveway, no stop, no standing zones. So we have that reflected. You can see the toll booths. So they're the white rectangles with bluish tops. We'll see the vehicles waiting on the dock for their turn to go load onto the vessel, and then heading left or right off the screen, you see vehicles approaching the intersection with Fauntleroy Way. Those are the unloading vehicles, and you can see the green and red bars that are reflecting which approach to that intersection is moving at that time. And so in this case, this is an unload movement. Those vehicles are departing and turning on the Fauntleroy Way, and Fauntleroy Way traffic is held. Go to the next slide, Laura. This is looking at it from a different view of the same area. And in this case, you can now see there's still unloading vehicles coming off. They're at that red bar, which is indicating they've been temporarily held so that the Fauntleroy traffic can flow. You'll also, if you look closely, you'll see pedestrians that have unloaded and are walking along the southern edge of the dock. So the model, of course, is reflecting all the steps in the unload process, with passengers unloading first, and then they walk off. Obviously, they're not walking as fast as the vehicles, so the vehicles catch up and go past them. So this is what, just wanted to share that for awareness purposes. And then now we have a short video clip that is a snippet from an overall simulation period that shows you how we all look at this, and the vehicles running through the simulation. In this case is in the loading phase. You can see how the unload phase is finished, and they've even reflected in the model how one of those unload lanes is used to, on a temporary shorter basis, get some extra vehicles into the loading process to load on. One thing I would note as a transition here into the results, just a reminder, this analysis does not assume infrahead loading. So the process is foot traffic and bicycles are all doing that across the transfer span. So let's talk about some of the results that come out of that traffic. So, or can you take that little pop-up? There we go. So this is the total unload and load time that we see across the alternatives as simulated out of the model. One of the things we do is we run the model 10 times and average the results across both those savings I mentioned. So representing that whole thing. You'll see we have the two dashed lines across the top of the graphic that show the scheduled well of the first and second sailing at 20 and 18-minute time. In the light blue, the second column over, that is the no-build alternative. It also is from a holding capacity, same as alternative A1. So that's our reference point. Alternative A to the left of it is slightly less holding, 76-ish vehicles instead of 84. So you see in the way the model is representing that, that actually takes a little bit longer than the baseline time to load and unload. And then to the right on this chart, you see alternatives B and B3, B1 and B2, and alternative C that all have a reduced load and unload time, larger dock capacities. They were lower by about 5 minutes in terms of the total load time. And then one of the things that we had discussion with in terms of the community advisory group is that it's all the same once you get to the capacity of BB3, which is 124, and larger dock sizes. You've reached that point where there's the full vessel load that is on the dock already downstream of the toll booth processing. And so specific to load and unload times, you don't see a change with the larger dock size. However, there are other operational efficiency reasons to be thinking about benefits of the larger dock size. But specific to the load and unload time, that's why you don't see a change there. Next slide. And this is the same similar information, load and unload time. This is a slide is showing the difference in time savings relative to the build. So that's why you don't see a column there at the no build, that's 0, and alternative A being the same. Alternative A being slightly longer, say negative time savings. The alternatives to the right are the time savings that I just mentioned relative to the no build. All right, let's move on to queue lengths. So as a reminder, the level 3 screening criteria is up at the top, which is how does the alternative change vehicle queuing on Fauntleroy Way? And some of the key considerations about this with respect to operational efficiency is that vehicles bound for either Vashon or Southworth, they both queue up in that single lane along southbound on Fauntleroy Way. Again, it holds about 143 vehicles. One of the issues that affects the operational efficiency is that vehicles bound to those different destinations, there's no way to sort them safely while they're out on Fauntleroy Way. So if one destination is a bit heavier than the other, you have to wait till they get to onto the, basically turn the corner onto the dock to begin, start sorting there. We can go to the next slide. Okay, so we have a combined chart with a lot of combined data on it. So I'm going to walk through this one a bit methodically. So this is our the estimation of future likelihood of the queuing along Fauntleroy Way to be at different points upstream of the terminal under the different alternatives. So we're showing both weekdays and weekends. So weekdays are on the left side of the chart and weekends are on the right side. And so you'll see a range of percent, that is the range of sailings that could see queuing at those different points in the future year. The range represents, we did both a low and a high demand representation to reflect the differences we see seasonally. So May, October timeframe being a higher demand than in some other months. That's what the range is representing. So just walking through this, the first set of numbers is just upstream of the entrance onto the dock and into the toll booths. You'll see location 1, which is the circle with a 1 around it. That matches the Southwest Cloverdale location, which you see linearly along the black line of Fauntleroy Way. And then location 2 is the number 2 in that green circle off to the right of the graphic. And that's at the North Lincoln Park parking lot entrance, and that's about 3,000 feet upstream of the dock. So as we walk through, I'll use location 1 to walk through this. Under the weekday column, you'll see location 1, alternative A, could see 37 to 47% of weekday sailings with queues at that point. The no build and alternative 1 is a range of 32 to 42% of sailings. Alternatives B and B3 are 13 to 16% of sailings at that point. And then alternative B1 and B2, we have estimated is be around 5% of the sailings. And then if you're at alternative C, it's 0% of the sailings having a queue likely to that area. So that's how you walk through this chart. I think one thing I'll reiterate is the 1 and the 2 refer to the distance along Fauntleroy Way. When we shared this information with the CAG earlier this week, we had some people looking at it and thinking it might have reflected the first or second sailing. That's not what it refers to. It's during the hours of the day and the number of sailings, what's the likelihood of point 1 or point 2. And so with that, I think we're ready to answer or take any questions and comments, Jill.
Yes. Thank you, Mark. Just pause to see if there are any questions or feedback on any of the information Mark presented. As he mentioned at the end there, we got some feedback last night from our community advisory group on some ways to help make that graphic a little easier to understand, and looking forward to your feedback as well. Penny.
So if you explain this, forgive me for asking this question, but just not as familiar looking at traffic analysis. So some of the difference between the alternatives have to do with both length and how many vehicles you store. And I was kind of wondering, are these percentages affected at all by just the size and how many can be stored on there, or is it looking at the good to go system, like, or did you keep those separate?
Yeah. Good question, Penny, and I'll read it. So these, the results we're showing here are all related to the different on-dock holding amounts. So we've not yet gotten to the good to go and wave to go differences that would relate to. Okay, so what we're going to do is take that same, we'll take the same approach and add on the good to go, wave to go for that toll booth processing difference to the dock sizes. So this is just related to on dock holding capacity.
Thanks, Mark. Penny, does that help address all of your question there?
Yep, that was great. Thanks for clarifying that.
Okay. Any other questions about any of the information Mark presented? We can certainly revisit slides or go back if we need to. We have the rest of the WSF team on the line as well. If you have any other questions about any of the information we've shared so far or what's coming. You're all in a quiet group compared to our community advisory group last night. I know it's a busy group, and yeah. Penny, come on in.
Just wondering if, as you look at this data, is internally, is it more, like, I know you're trying to present this objectively, but is there a desire to reduce the queue lines on South West Fauntleroy Way? Is that like something that you guys are like, sweet, we are reducing that queue? Just curious if that is part of the internal discussion. I'm just curious.
Maybe I'll introduce a couple of sort of, I guess I'll call it the objective side of it, Penny. So we certainly know that one thing that, I don't know, I mean, certainly it happens. WSF can talk about this. We do know it happens that there can be frustration and issues with line cutting, or there's sometimes when you have a queue that is on a street like this that varies, because that's what happens when you're in front of the terminal or coming up to the terminal, and the length of it and interpreting, you're figuring out is that a parked car versus a ferry queue that can present some frustration or just driver maneuvers around that. And we've certainly heard CAG members speak to that in earlier meetings. The other aspect is that, see, from a use of the street for purposes, it has a relationship to if you need to use it for holding, then that means it is not available for other purposes that might be used, whether that's parking near the park, parking near somebody's resident. I'll represent. We've certainly heard from some of the CAG members that live in that area that, I think I would be fair to say that they've said they're used to that, that situation of having the holding line being there. So, we hear a variety of different perspectives, but with respect to it, there are, I would say, some certainly aspects that relate to that we've heard on both sides of it would be better if it was reduced, and others kind of just saying, well, it doesn't necessarily matter to them. I would also just go back to the point that from this terminal or any terminal that has a couple destinations on it and the sorting, that is not something that you can do out on Fauntleroy Way in a safe way. So there is a relationship to some of the operating efficiently and loading that, if Trevor wants to jump in, there is a relationship just from the effectiveness and smoothness, I guess I'll call it, of the loading process.
Thanks, Mark. I've pulled up the purpose and need and screening criteria related to queuing, and I saw that both Hadley and Dave came on screen. So I know Mark shared quite a bit there, but Hadley or Dave, was there anything else you wanted to add?
No, I was going to say one of our screening, one reason we're talking about it is one of the screening criteria, one of the factors that we'll be evaluating is how does each alternative change vehicle queuing on Fauntleroy Way, and it's lower, similar, or higher estimated queuing. So Penny, I think you could interpret that as like lower queuing is better, higher is, more of an impact.
Cool. Thank you. I don't know.
It's going to feed into that screening, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Okay. And I know it's a weird question and you guys have, been discussing this, but the percentages just kind of made me stop and just go, you mean you can actually, it almost looks like you could eliminate a queue, and maybe I'm reading the numbers incorrectly with these percentages. And so maybe I just don't understand as well. But I was surprised. I was like, I would just assume that if you guys have chosen an alternative where it seems like you're like, whatever we're looking at, there's going to be a queue, and obviously lower would be better. But I was like, really, is there really truly a way to eliminate it? And maybe I read the numbers wrong. So.
But yeah, I'll just walk through the numbers again. The alternatives, the way they work from top to bottom is essentially the higher amount of on dock holding, and so that is a relationship with their vehicles stored there, queued there for the load, waiting for the loading versus on Fauntleroy Way. Again, I'll reflect some of the feedback we heard from CAG members on Tuesday is that some are, reflecting that while we might show in terms of this analysis that there's a high likelihood of having at certain points. We'll note if you look to the far left, on the weekdays, we do show upstream of even the entrance that there's some likelihood of queuing. It's just about the extent of it. The other thing I'll note is that we heard in commentary from CAG members, and it's fair, we've not in this analysis looked at say a 4th of July weekend or some really, really high travel weekend. This is high demand, low demand, but there's still a possibility of it. It's certainly proportionally, I think the ratios or the relationships between more or less is it's logical, and it will just need to be, reminder that there's a wide variety of Pell criteria that this is going to be all evaluated with. This is not the only metric. There's many others in terms of the evaluation criteria.
Yep, that's an important point. Thanks for breaking that down further, Mark.
Thank you. I'm just wanting to understand it a little better, because I know that, from my perspective, I really look at those alternatives like in terms of the natural resource impacts. And so, I know you guys have I think a little bit tougher job sometimes just balancing all of the things. So I'm trying to understand how these might really come into play, and maybe have a more, I don't know how the right word to say, but a little bit more weight sometimes when you're looking like how that traffic comes in and really can push an alternative when I'm like, no, this one over here is the better one for the environment, that kind of thing. So thank you for going over some of this stuff.
Yeah, happy to, Penny. That's why we're here.
Yeah, thank you. Those questions are really helpful too as we think about the tasks that we have ahead in terms of communicating about these alternatives and all of the analysis that we're doing to the broader community later this year. Okay, any other thoughts or questions on Mark's content here? This is really the end of our formal presentation, so we just have some next steps to review, but just pause another minute or so. Okay, well, I know you all have probably a busy day of meetings, so I won't keep you longer than we need to. Just a few next steps for our technical advisory group. Our next meeting topics, as Dave mentioned, at the start of the call, we plan to review the good to go and advanced ticketing results at our next meeting. We're still working to identify the date of that, but it will probably be either before or after the Labor Day holiday. So coming up fairly quickly. And then we also plan to discuss the cost estimates and construction approach, hopefully in one meeting before we finalize and have another meeting on the level 3 screening results. Thank you to everyone for participating today. We really value your participation in this process, and please don't hesitate if you have any other questions for the team after today's call. You know how to reach us. Penny, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, I was wondering if you wanted, like, you'd sent us a lot of good information before the meeting to review. Were you wanting us to review any of that, like give you even more feedback based on those materials as well? I mean,
Yeah.
you know, I know they were to prep for the meeting, but like if you're like, hey, that was a pretty good deep dive, and so are you asking for feedback? I'm looking at the email and
Yes, that's a great question. And I probably should have said that at the start of the call. I know we sent you a lot of attachments. Some of those, the environmental analysis is information that we had covered at our prior meetings. We've also sent a full copy of the traffic analysis. So Mark kind of went through the key results today, but you're welcome to really dig into that content. And if you have any, additional comments, questions, we certainly want to hear them. So absolutely welcome any feedback that you have on the materials that we sent out. And as Hadley mentioned, or maybe it was Dave, we will also be sending out it was Dave, a copy of the good to go and advanced ticketing study before we meet. So that will be another one to kind of keep an eye out, and it will be a pretty hefty document to look at, and then we'll go through the results.
and is that good to go kind of its own separate analysis, kind of like how these alternatives and size holdings were separate? Yes.
It is
I'm
a
seeing
separate
it.
analysis.
Okay.
Yeah, I see Dave nodding. It is,
Okay.
but it does, like Mark mentioned earlier, it builds on the traffic analysis and the data from the traffic analysis. So hoping to kind of, we wanted to set the stage today and explain this important component of the project before we really go even one step deeper with good to go and advanced ticketing.
Okay. Cool. Thank you.
Yes, great questions. Thank you, everyone, and you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Yep. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.